Democrats can't understand how President Trump has such a good economy. So there's a piece by Jared Bernstein, the chief economist to former VP Joe Biden and senior fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, lamenting that we have such a good economy with such a terrible leader. And he can't figure it out. And the answer, of course, is that we have a good economy because Trump doesn't bother business, because Trump is not in the business of stopping business. Trump is not in the business of punishing success. And this is exactly the point. Bernie Sanders is in that business. Everyone of any semblance of sound mind should look at Bernie Sanders and say to themselves, forget about all of Trump's character flaws, okay? Forget about Trump. The possibility of Bernie Sanders, an 80-year-old socialist who has never produced a thing, who stumps for the destruction of America's foreign policy, military, and American domestic economic power, that person could be president of the United States, should terrify anyone who has two brain cells to rub together. I mean, I find that terrifying. Don't worry. Socialism, guys, is all about honest people doing honest things to help the people. How do we know that Bernie is dishonest in this way? I'll give you an example. So yesterday, Bernie does this town hall on CNN, and Bernie is asked about Bloomberg, and he says, I'm offended that Michael Bloomberg is trying to buy the presidency. Before we get to the clip, I just want to point something out. Every Democrat who says that they are offended that Michael Bloomberg, by pouring his own dollars that he earned himself into presidential ads, that is buying the presidency, let me just point out that Bernie Sanders has promised voters free college tuition, free health care, free housing, free child care, and free unicorn. So he's trying to buy voters with my money. Okay, at least Bloomberg is trying to appeal to voters with his own money. At least Bloomberg is spending his own cash on why he's such a great guy. Bernie Sanders is pledging to spend my cash to prove to you what a wonderful guy he is. Okay, so I have far less tolerance for this whole stop trying to buy elections from people who literally try to buy elections by promising you free crap. Okay, anyway, here's Bernie Sanders ripping on Michael Bloomberg for quote-unquote trying to buy the presidency, as opposed to Bernie Sanders, who is apparently spending $50 million a month at this point on advertising.
I do think it's a bit obscene that we have somebody who, by the way, chose not to contest in Iowa, in Nevada, in South Carolina, in New Hampshire, where all of the candidates, we did town meetings, we're talking to thousands and thousands of people working hard. He said, I don't have to do that. I'm worth $60 billion. I have more wealth than the bottom 125 million Americans. I'll buy the presidency. That offends me very much.
Okay, so he's very upset. He's trying to buy the president. And we keep hearing this from people. He's trying to buy the presidency. Advertising is not buying the presidency any more than advertising for Nike is forcing people to buy Nike shoes. If you don't like Bloomberg, you are free not to buy his routine. Okay, again, you may not like that he's buying the ads. Believe me, the amount of publicity he's get for buying the ads is nearly even with the amount of publicity that he gets from the actual ad buys. But here's the point. Sanders says he's very offended that Bloomberg is trying to buy the presidency, and then he immediately refuses to answer whether he will take Michael Bloomberg's money in the general election. Of course he does. Of course he does. Because it's all fun and games ripping on billionaires until you need to seize their wealth and use it to control the means of production if you're a commie.
If Michael Bloomberg doesn't get it, you get the nomination. Would you accept if he says, look, I got $500 million left over that I'm going to give to you, would you accept that?
Well, what I did say is that if Mr. Bloomberg wins, and I certainly hope he does not, I will support the Democratic nominee. As of now, we don't have a super PAC. We're not asking for a super PAC. That is my position right now.
So you're not sure if you would take the money or not? Okay, I'll leave it there.
So what that is right there is Bernie being a damned liar, right? He knows what the answer is. The answer is, of course, he'll take the money. Of course, he'll take the money. Bernie Sanders is very much against billionaires until he needs their money to fund his garbage schemes or his crap campaign. So spare me he's trying to buy the election. I don't like Michael Bloomberg. He's very rich. He's trying to buy the election. Also, if you could hand me that checkbook, I would really appreciate if you could hand me a checkbook. What a piece of scuzz Bernie Sanders is. It is just a source of endless insanity to me that the Democratic Party is preparing to nominate this human being. It's insane. The man is a walking coexist bumper sticker, as Noah Rothman over a commentary put it. And then he tweets this out. Together, we are going to end the greed of the billionaire class. Okay, I have just a question about this. Just one question. Which is more greedy? The quote-unquote billionaire class? People who created a business and then sold lots of products and did lots of voluntary transactions and employed tens of thousands of people and provided products to presumably millions of people and made millions of people's lives easier. Or the octogenarian communist who has done zero useful things his entire life except suck off the teat of the state and the billionaire taxpayer. Who is greedier? I'm so sick of these people suggesting that true altruism lies in sucking off the teats of people who actually earn. It's insanity. And this has nothing to do with my income level. I've been saying the same thing since I was making like 50 grand a year, okay? I totally get it. It's absolute nonsense. And people who buy into this, it turns out that envy should not be a political platform. That's all this is. The greed of the billionaire. So when do you become greedy? Just a serious question. Like, Bernie's a millionaire. Did he become more greedy when his net wealth went to 1,000,001? When that ticker just flipped up, suddenly he became greedy? Or is it the truth that, as the founders understood, all human beings have the capacity for greed, and all human beings have the capacity for altruism, and all human beings have the capacity for sin, and all human beings have the capacity for decency? But according to Bernie, because he's a materialist Marxist, he believes that as you get richer, you get more greedy. And therefore, actual saintliness lies in being a sponge. Right? If you're Bernie and you've never done a useful thing in your life, you're actually good. You're good because you've never been greedy. Don't you understand? You're taking other people's money for doing nothing, but you're not greedy. Because the only way we measure greed is by your material circumstance. The richer you are, the more greedy you are. Therefore, the poorer you are, the less greedy you are. And your personal activity doesn't come into this at all. Okay, this is the person that you guys want to nominate for president. All right. Sure. Okay, so Bernie yesterday, while he was on CNN, he also decided to sound off on national rent control. So not only does he want to sink the U.S. economy, he'd also like to destroy the national real estate economy, which is one of the great sources of wealth in America and has been for generations. Let's just be clear about what rent control does. Rent control says that you cannot rent this thing that you built at the price that you wish to rent it at the market price. Instead, Bernie Sanders is going to decide what you should be able to rent your apartments for. Rent control has failed every single place it has tried. Why? Because it turns out that you cannot have some sort of Politburo sitting above developers and deciding what they ought to charge, because eventually developers will be like, guess what? I'm not making enough money from that. I'm not going to build. I'm not going to build. And Bernie knows that, which is why we're going to end up with a bunch of federally subsidized housing projects, presumably designed by Bernie in classic East German style. Here's Bernie Sanders talking about national rent control as though the great solution to a shortage of housing is to create more shortage of housing by disincentivizing development.
I spent my entire childhood in a rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And that meant that my family, at least, we didn't have a lot of money, but we didn't have to worry about rents, going up by 10, 15%, which many Americans do. We believe that rent control is an appropriate tool nationally to tell landlords that they cannot simply jack up their rents to any rate that they want.
Okay, you know what else tells people they can't jack up their rents to any rate that they want? You know what tells them that? The market. Because if I jacked up the rates on my apartment building to rates that people were not willing to pay, you know what would happen? It's called vacancy. But he doesn't understand how markets work. He thinks that basically a developer just sits there and then goes, I'd like to rent this place for $1 million a month, and I'll force you to take it. Because Bernie doesn't understand consent. It's amazing. Socialists don't understand consent.